Hedieh Mirahmadi. Is that close? Thank you. See how gracious she is? And she's here to talk to us today about Islam. And I have to confess to you that while I will at least bluff you into believing I know something about Christianity, I can't even bluff you about Islam. So I heard about this wonderful Hedieh who has made these kind of presentations before, and I'm going to get out of her way now and invite her to come forward and to present for us. And she has so many good things to say and such a short time to say it. So please come and join us and greet you. Let us greet you for being here with us. Hedieh, this is the group that meets every week, and we talk about our neighbor's faith. And so today is Islam.
Thank you all for being here today, and I hope I have I'm able to teach you a little bit about Islam beyond the headlines. And I will cover some of the issues that are in the headlines at the very end of my presentation, but I'm hoping today to go through an outline of an introduction to Islam, foundational beliefs and practices, and then an overview of the culture, institutions, and common holidays, and then specific advice about interacting with Muslim Americans. So in case you get invited to a Muslim American home or you're involved in interfaith activities, you'll go to a mosque. I have a couple of recommendations about that. And then lastly, we're going to cover the contested issues in Islam, the things that you do read in the newspaper. I also wanted to know by a show of hands, how many of you have interactions with Muslim Americans? Just so we know. Oh, look at that. Fantastic. Okay. And it's kind of a lot of material to cover. So if you have any questions as we go along, I have no problem answering them in the middle. Otherwise, we can do it at the end. But if you do have a question before I continue, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. So I'm going to say next slide, and my colleague down here is going to click it. I just couldn't manage all the moving parts. So, okay, next slide. Next slide. Here we're doing the core principles. Common terminology. So these are the words that are often used to describe Islam or to talk about something related to Muslims. So Islam, and people comment on the cliche, why do people keep saying Islam means peace? Because literally in Arabic it means peace. So it's not because we're trying to say that it's just a peaceful religion, but literally the word translates as peace. That's why that phrase was developed. Muslim is somebody who practices Islam. It's not Islamic people, it's Muslims. Sunnis, it's the majority sect in Islam. 75 to 90% of the Muslim population is Sunni. Shia, of course, is the second largest sect. Quran is the holy scripture of Muslims. The Sunnah is the Prophet Muhammad's habits and traditions, and they were dictated to his companions and then transcribed over the centuries, and they're a very important part of what Muslims believe and part of the faith. The masjid, or a mosque, is our house of worship. The hijab is the veil or scarf that women wear, like my own. Sharia, we'll discuss that a little bit later too. That is the moral code or religious laws of Islam. Sufism is the spiritual or mystic component of Islam. Sheikh is a spiritual guide, or as you hear, it's the oil sheikhs. So the term means two things. It's actually the leaders in the Gulf states, or it's a religious teacher. And imam is the prayer leader, and the ulama is the plural of alim, which means a teacher or a learned scholar in Islam. And I'm sorry, could you guys read it? It's kind of far away, I guess, but I'm sorry, if I knew you, I hear people asking for handouts. If I knew you all liked handouts, I would have printed this for you, but I guess next time. Next slide. Core, and these are the core pillars, what we describe in Islam as the 5 pillars of Islam. So this is the foundational belief all Muslims universally accept. So it's the Shahada, which is the testimony of faith that there is only one God and Muhammad is the last messenger of God. And the Salah, which is the prayer, as you all may No, we pray 5 times a day at specific times, and everywhere around the world, depending on where you are located, there'll be a specific time, and everybody in that area will pray at that time, or supposed to pray at that time. Zakat is our charity. 2.5% of one's savings goes to the less fortunate every year. Fasting, we have the holy month of Ramadan, which was just concluded. And then pilgrimage. Everyone who is able should at least one time in their life visit Mecca and perform the pilgrimage. Next slide. So, sorry, please. I did, actually, 2 years ago I attended. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. But I did. Oh, not just getting there. I mean, it's 3 million people in a very small square footage, and the whole thing is extremely difficult. I mean, especially as an American, you're used to all of the comforts of being an American and air conditioning and food and things. It's really, really difficult. I know a lot of Muslims say, no, it's this great experience. It was holy and spiritual. I was traumatized. I had a very difficult time. I was like this the whole time. I was like, I just got to go home. I just got to make it through this. So, yes. Yeah, it's actually really difficult, and all different schools of thoughts have different theories about it. So some people are very strict, and they require that at that prayer time it comes in, you have to perform it at that time, and if you don't, it's a grave sin. Some people believe that there's a theory in Islam that necessity waives sins. So a lot of people say, well, because I'm working and I don't have accommodation to pray, I can pray it when I get home. So the prayer times are spanned throughout the day. There's an early morning prayer, and then there's a noon prayer, and then we have an Asr prayer, which is midday, and then sunset and evening. So it's usually only the Zohr and Asr, the ones in the middle of the day, that are really hard for people. So people who are in a work environment where they can't pray usually do those when they get home. And then kids, it depends on what date like what age it's obligatory, but anywhere between 13 and 15. And then again, the midday prayers the kids usually do when they come home. So the 6 principles of faith. So besides the 5 pillars of Islam, on top of that, we have the 6 pillars of faith, also known as Iman. And that is belief in God. And Allah is, again, an Arabic term for God. So it doesn't mean a separate God. It's just the Arabic term for God. And belief in the angels, all the angels, the same angels that you read about in Christianity. And belief in the revealed books. So it is the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. So these are considered sacred books sent by God in Islam as well. And the belief in the Day of Judgment, the resurrection and the afterlife, and the belief in the predestination by God of all things, both good and evil. And then belief in the prophets and the messengers. So it's all the way from Adam and Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, and then finally Muhammad. So it accepts all the prophets in between, even the prophets during the time of Judaism and during right before Moses' time. So it's including the belief in all of the prophets. Next slide. And I find that a lot of people, when we make this presentation, this is a very interesting concept to them. They didn't realize that Islam incorporates the beliefs of the other faiths. But so as an Abrahamic faith, as it is known, it embraces Christians and Jews as monotheists, fellow monotheists, and believers in the one God. And they believe that Muslims believe that God's messages have been revealed to certain communities throughout history, and we respect the previous traditions, including the concept of Virgin Mary, Jesus, and Moses. And we believe that Muhammad was the last messenger sent by God, and his final message was revealed in the Quran. And the Muslim holy book in the Quran, it recognizes the Torah and the Bible as divine revelations and honors Christians and Jews as the people of the book. And in the past Muslim empires, people of the book were able to administer their own laws concerning personal and family affairs, and they were allowed to consume items such as pork or wine, which were prohibited to Muslims. And given their shared traditions, Muslims have at times coexisted with other faiths throughout the world very well. After the Prophet Muhammad, he ensured religious freedoms to non-Muslim citizens, and subsequent Muslim leaders throughout the world followed this practice. Today, many Muslim Americans have founded NGOs and dialogue circles to renew the tradition of working side by side with different faiths. Next slide. So, diversity within Islam. A lot of people are surprised that actually there isn't a monolithic interpretation of Islam. A lot of the extremists tried to think or tried to project this view that there's only one religion and there's only one way that the doctrine can be taught, but that's actually very far from the truth. There are no monolithic interpretations of Islam or the Quran. There are multiple schools of Islamic jurisprudence. There's no single codified text of Islamic law or Sharia. There's no universal Islamic dress. It varies in countries and in different communities. They decide their definitions of modesty change. Not all Muslims identify with Arab culture, and many do not even speak Arabic. And there's also great diversity in Islamic architecture. So you'll see these examples on these slides of different communities' versions and interpretations of what a mosque or a religious institution should look like. So, given over a dozen states have tried to introduce legislation to ban Sharia, it is important that we're clear about what Sharia is and what Sharia is not. So, there are the varying rules and regulations that codify Islamic law are all part of Sharia. So, how to pray, the timing of prayer, marriage, divorce, inheritance, all these things, even performing the pilgrimage, all these things are part of Sharia. So it's the entire corpus of law in Islam. So it is to say that you could take this and replace the Constitution is virtually impossible. So just that notion of taking Sharia and replacing it with the Constitution, as you may have heard a lot of people talking about in terms of the threat that Islam poses to the United States, is really a really impossible notion. That's not to say that there aren't certain Muslim movements that are trying to implement aspects of Sharia. So a lot of Muslims, very similar to Orthodox Jewish communities, are asking for courts to litigate marriages, contracts, inheritance based on Islamic law. And so they are trying to implement parts of Sharia into the justice system, and that creates a number of controversies and difficulties, and I'm sure it does the same in the Orthodox Jewish community, but in the Muslim community, depending on how, like for example in a divorce, how the couple feels about the implementation of Sharia. I mean, for a lot of Muslim Americans, being part of America and availing yourself of the American legal system is very, very important. So to think that you're going to get married and then your husband's going to say, or the wife is going to say, you can't the American courts can't divorce me because you have to abide by Sharia, would be very off-putting. And actually, a lot of the courts cases that are being litigated right now where this issue comes up is exactly that, where people are saying, whether it's the man or the woman, they're saying, you cannot judge my marriage any different than any other marriage in America. I want to avail myself of the American court system, and I don't want it judged by Sharia. So that's where these issues have come into play, especially recently. Next slide. So I wanted to give a couple examples of modes of dress in Islamic societies. So Islam encourages modesty, but there is no standard dress code. Each country and region varies considerably based on their cultural norms. Loose clothing is encouraged for males and females. However, you could see women wearing headscarves and tight clothing at the same time too. It's all based on what the personal preferences and the society and culture that person is living in. And there's an ongoing debate now in modern American and Western communities about the necessity of the veil and whether it's exactly mandated by Islam and Islamic law. So you will see that debate exists as well. Next slide. So now we're going to cover some of Islamic culture. Next slide. The mosque. So it's typically, in Muslim societies, it's generally not just a house of worship. So Muslims can technically pray anywhere, but it's a place where people foster a sense of community. Though they do go there to pray, there's also a lot of other activities that take place in a mosque. There are weddings, often funerals, there are social issues, political issues, that occur in the mosque, and it's just a general central meeting place for the community. And in the US, Muslims have created mosques to serve their communities, and sometimes they cater to specific ethnic and cultural communities as well. So now we have our Islamic holidays, and as some of you may know, we just finished Ramadan. So we just finished Eid al-Fitr, which is the commemoration of the end of Ramadan, and we have feasts, and we have carnivals, and the kids get presents, and it's a very big holiday for Muslims. And the other ones are Eid al-Adha, which is the feast and celebration after the pilgrims are coming back from Mecca. And so people around the world celebrate that even if they did not go on the pilgrimage. And then we have Mawlid al-Nabi, which is a celebration of the Prophet's birthday. And countries around the world and Muslim Americans celebrate that as well. And then we have the day of Arafah, which is generally a solemn occasion where people fast to celebrate the pilgrims that are in Mecca as well. Next slide. Yeah, sure. Sure. So yes, those are the dates in the Islamic calendar when that holiday occurs. So when you see Muharram, the first of Muharram, that is the Islamic New Year. And Ashura is the 10th of Muharram, and you may hear Shias commemorate because it was a huge battle, and a lot of the relatives of the Prophet were killed. 72 relatives of the Prophet were killed by a competing army. And so it's a very solemn occasion, and a lot of people fast on that day. It's a very big issue for the Shias especially. And then those are the other holidays. So Mawlid al-Nabi occurs on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, which is also an Islamic calendar month. Sure. And again, this is Ramadan is the month of fasting, and it's people, and Muslims fast 30 days, sunrise to sunset. Absolutely no water, no food. They break fast with what we call iftar, and they eat in the morning before the sunrise prayer. And then other than that, so this past month, it was 18 hours without food. Very difficult to say the least, but it's a universally recognized Muslim tradition. So next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Muslims in America. So most Muslims are well integrated in American society, as you know, and about 2/3 will say in a Pew study that the quality of life for Muslims in America is better than in most Muslim countries. And so this slide is a little bit about the habits of Muslims and how they compare to the general public. And if you see how much TV they watch, it's pretty similar, 58% to 62%. Using social networking sites, 57%, so it's even higher than the average public. The third one is watching pro sports. It's actually a little higher, 48% to 47%. Displaying the American flag, it's a little bit less, 44%. And then regularly playing video games, about equal 18%. See that? And in terms of religiosity, so like Christian Americans, many Muslim Americans believe they are highly religious. So another study according to Pew says that 69% say religion is very important in their lives as compared to 70% of Christians. And almost half of both Muslims and Christians report attending worship services at least once a week. So here's a little bit about engaging with Muslim American communities. And this is about visiting a mosque and certain customs and habits that you would encounter when you visit a mosque. So in many Muslim countries, women pray at home. So it may seem odd to you that there's not a lot of women in the mosque, but for immigrant communities, that was just customary. That was a habit they brought from back home, so they just don't attend the mosque. But here, and especially in Western countries, it's much more prevalent to see women in the mosque. But sometimes there'll be separate doors. So you need to pay attention if you're attending an event in a mosque. Usually, especially in America, people try to be accommodating and not impose those rules when they have visitors. But don't be surprised if you go somewhere and they say, okay, women enter through this other door. Quite frankly, it bothers me, so I mean, what can we do? It's an old cultural thing. It has nothing to do with the tenets of Islam. It's a much more cultural habit of people that come from certain societies that they've just basically imported and integrated into their practice of Islam. Out of respect, you may see also young Muslims may be silent in front of elders. So, or they may bow their heads and avoid direct eye contact. This is simply out of respect. It's not because they've been told they're not allowed to speak. It's just, again, a cultural habit that a lot of young Muslims may have. And you will hear the Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. And there's also this issue of handshaking. So sometimes Muslim women will not shake the hand of another man. And this is, actually people ask me, is this because they think non-Muslims are dirty? And it absolutely has nothing to do with that. It is that for some sects in Islam, if you touch the hand of an opposite sex that is not a relative, a close first degree relative, then you break your ritual prayer abilities. So it's called wudu, which is the ritual washing that you do before prayer. So that contact would break your ability to pray, and then you have to do the ritual washing again. So both men and women of some sects in Islam avoid doing that just so they don't have to wash again before they pray. And they would do it to a Muslim as well, so it's not specific to a non-Muslim. And being alone with a person of the opposite gender sometimes is discouraged. So if you see somebody getting antsy because you're a male and a female alone, that's why. And if you're entering a mosque and it's prayer time, try to be respectful of the fact that there's a prayer time, and then you're welcome to either watch or sit back in another room. And there is a sensitivity to dogs. So, it's a lot of people carry small dogs around. To Muslims, dogs are considered unclean animals, so they're very sensitive about the presence of dogs. So bringing dogs in a place, or if you're in an elevator, I see this happen a lot where people are they're very surprised by why Muslims are so sensitive about being around a dog and don't want the dog to touch them. Again, this has to do with prayer. So if you are touched by a dog, or the saliva of a dog, or the fur of a dog, you can't pray until you wash 7 times. So it's not just the breaking by contact, it's actually considered a ritual impurity that you need to fix with washing 7 times. So that's the sensitivity of dogs. And then again, you may attend a service, and it's perfectly acceptable to retreat to the back and not participate. Next slide. No, yeah, it's just dogs. It's the fur and the saliva of a dog, not a cat.
One of your family members touches a dog and they're not Muslim. My neighbors, the wife is Christian
Okay.
and husband is Muslim, and the wife has always said she's definitely afraid of dogs. But now, with this explanation, I'm thinking maybe something elected for them that is too.
So, we raise our kids, so nobody explains this. So our kids, we tell the kid, don't touch the dog, don't touch the dog. And so all the kids are just they leap when they see a dog, and we've never explained to them why either. So you'll see a lot of Muslims have this visceral response to a dog. It's because we've been conditioned since we were little by our parents, nobody explained why, don't touch the dog. So that's why you see this very animated responses to dogs. And people often find it strange, but it's just because religiously it's considered an impure animal. So this is a little bit of information about the Quran. So oftentimes some people can be sensitive about handling a Quran, so sometimes it's better to ask permission. We don't place it on the floor. We don't write on it. We don't place other things on top of it. And it is common for Muslims to keep it in their purse or in their car for blessings and protection. And you may often find in a Muslim home calligraphy and writing on the walls that are excerpts from the Quran. And you may also find Muslims in a corner, in a bus stop, in a restaurant, reciting Quran to themselves because it's a habit of Muslims to do it at least once a day. So that's where that's coming from. Next slide. And this is about engagement in the home. So, and this was particularly relevant sometimes for people, for law enforcement, when they were knocking on the door of a Muslim house and and there was this delay. So we would explain that, for Muslim women, they won't be covered in their homes. So it may take them some time to scramble and get a scarf or some other kind of jacket to put on if the doorbell rings. So there may be delay at some times. And again, this issue of handshake, it's probably better not to initiate a handshake with somebody of the opposite gender. And for Muslims, this eating issue comes up quite often. So in Muslim society, food is a big part of the way we communicate and the way we develop relationships. So it's not customary to say no. So if you invite somebody to your home or you invite them to a meeting and you're like, oh, will you please have some tea or have some cookies? Like, no, I'm not hungry. To Muslims, that seems like you don't want to share in an experience with them. It's culturally a way in which Muslims develop ties. And so oftentimes people say that, especially kids, they go to a Muslim family's home and the mother keeps saying, eat, 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 have some spaghetti, have some rice, have some soup. And the kid's like, leave me alone, I don't want to eat, you know? So this is because of the difference in the habits and the cultural background and this emphasis on food. This has also come up with the issue of silverware. So some Muslim homes, especially South Asian families, they don't use silverware when they eat. So it is perfectly acceptable to ask for silverware if you're dining at a home in which they do not use silverware. And we often pass dishes using the right hand. So there are some issues about eating with your left hand and using the right hand to eat because the right hand is blessed. So if you see that custom, that's where that comes from. Yes? Yeah. It's a big thing. Again, it's a cultural thing. So we believe that, especially with food, that with every bite of food you consume with your right hand, angels take that food into the body to nourish it, and that it's much more connected to evil to use the left hand. So they are constantly, so whenever they find kids that are left-handed, they're constantly trying to make them use their right hand. And especially, even if you write with your left hand, they want to make sure you eat with your right hand, even if you write with the left. So that's why she's doing that. But it's perfectly acceptable to say, I understand that culturally for you, the left hand is a problem, but for us it's not. So please allow the child to be comfortable using their left hand. Just realize it's just a cultural positioning that's different. I'm sorry. Well, and especially if it's of a concern for you, you should say something and say, I realize that culturally you prefer children to use their right hand, but for us it's not a problem, and it's making the child a little bit self-conscious, so I ask that you not do that. It's perfectly acceptable to do that. So our next section, next slide, is the contested issues in Islam that affect public safety. And first and foremost is the notion of jihad. So you hear a lot about jihad, especially on the news or on the radio or in articles. Jihadis, which is the term that has been developed to talk about people, militants that are fighting either in terrorism or other foreign conflicts. And it is probably the single most abused concept in Islam. So it principally is supposed to mean an internal struggle to control one's ego and to submit to God. And it is used in the Quran 100 different ways to refer to that struggle. But there is a single instance of combative jihad, and it requires very strict tenets for implementation that requires, and it's a little bit complicated, but for the sake of brevity, you need a Muslim ruler, or as it is now with nation states, to call for jihad, and then the citizens of that state, it's just like conscription into the army or calling for battle in any other nation. So in a Muslim nation, it would be called jihad. In America, it would be called war. So, but it requires the ruler to implement in a combative jihad. And historically, it is supposed to be defensive, not offensive, and it's supposed to be when Muslims are oppressed or Muslims are unable to practice their religion or there's some kind of invasion or occupation. But unfortunately, the extremists, what they've done is they said that we're in this permanent state of war. So since the decline of the Ottoman Empire, there is this kind of permanent ongoing jihad, so that jihad has become fard ayn, which means it's become obligatory on every Muslim, just as praying and fasting, as the 5 pillars you learned earlier. The militants say it is the 6th pillar of Islam, and it's obligatory on all Muslims to follow, no matter where they are or at what time period they're living in. And so this is the real struggle between mainstream Muslim communities and the militants, is how do you define jihad, who can call jihad, and when is jihad legitimate? Any questions about that? Okay. Next slide, domestic violence. So I'm often asked in Western countries, is it permissible for men to beat their wives in Islam? And unfortunately, this whole notion of wife beating comes from a single verse and interpretation of the word daraba in the Quran, where God was describing relations between a man and a woman and was explaining that if there was difficulty in the relationship and you've tried a number of means and it didn't work, then you should separate. It was darabrun, which means about 26 different linguistic interpretations. But unfortunately, historically, it has been interpreted as to beat or to beat lightly. So nowadays, Muslim scholars are really trying to fix this record and translate it as to separate. And then the verse continues, and then once you've reconciled, come back together. So they're trying to culturally change the way Muslims view that verse, but that is where that controversy stems from. And unfortunately, it's taking a while. It's taking a while to rectify. But a lot of Muslim scholars are doing their best to try to fix that interpretation, especially here in the West. Next slide. Depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. People often ask me why was there such an uproar? And mainstream Muslims believe that there are no images recorded of the Prophet. So it's not just the caricature that matters, it's the fact that his likeness was drawn. So even mainstream Muslims, even when they're doing a movie or they're writing a story or a children's book, they don't show pictures of the Prophet. So to them, when there was a picture that was depicted, it was highly offensive because they're saying that somebody's trying to create his likeness. And but however, the anger and violence that ensued comes from an ignorance of religious traditions. So mainstream scholars around the world said, that the Prophet was very patient and compassionate with people who didn't understand or respect Islam, and there's no reason for us not to have that same compassion and tolerance and patience, and understand that people don't respect or revere the Prophet Muhammad the same way we do, and that we needed to be compromising and understand the difference in beliefs and traditions. Another sensitive topic, praying outside. So people get a little nervous when they see Muslims like this young college student praying outside. They think it's like a call to war. It's just part of the tradition that Muslims, a lot of conservative Muslims especially, like to pray. It's one of the tenets of Islam to pray standing and to pray on time. So some people like to, standing I mean being able to do the full motions of prayer, which include standing. So a lot of people nowadays will pray seated in their car or in their classroom, but a lot of people still do like to be able to go through the full ritual, and they'll find a place to pray outside. The other example, which is a Muhajirun rally in the UK on the left, is this kind of public spectacle of prayer and on a street. That's not appropriate. So that's not a normal tenet in Islam, to close a street and say, everybody come and pray in the middle of the street. And especially, it has to be clean earth, and a street wouldn't be considered clean earth. So that's much more an extremist statement about trying to make a political statement or trying to intimidate people by doing that. It is not a mainstream practice. Next slide. So this is a picture of Shohreh Aghdashloo, who is an Iranian-American Academy Award-winning actress. She's just been recruited to the hit show The Mob Doctor. And I just used her picture to show you just how much a part of American pulp culture that Muslims can play. And I hope this presentation gave you a little bit more information about your neighbor's faith. And I wanted to say a little bit about my organization. We do the International Cultural Center up off of Exit 11 in Gaithersburg in Montgomery Village, where what we're trying to do is take the Muslim American communities and all of their neighbors' faith communities and engage in community service together. So we do a signature program called Youth Against Hunger, which takes place one Sunday a month, and it happens to be August 25th this month, where we bring children and families together to make sandwiches for the homeless. Our goal is to make 700 sandwiches and 80 pounds of fresh cut vegetables each time, and we deliver them to the 8 local shelters. And we're very, very proud of the program. It's given kids a chance to interact with people of other communities, getting to know one another on a social basis, and being able to serve our neighborhood community together. We are also very involved in the Montgomery County Faith Community Working Group, where we're trying to build the faith community's relationship with Montgomery County public officials, so that the Montgomery County officials take into consideration the faith community's needs when it comes to disaster preparedness, land use, religious land use, building new religious houses of worship. My particular subcommittee is on the intervention and prevention of violence. So that is about getting our county officials and private institutions to understand the new definitions of at-risk. After the marathon bombings and the case of the Schneider brothers, we realized that there are many facets to Muslim kids, especially getting radicalized, but not only that, realizing that there are social conditions and psychological conditions that are causing some of these kids to go off the tracks, and that it requires a holistic approach of the community to try to intervene and have a better relationship with law enforcement, and to try to give these kids another opportunity to integrate in society rather than taking such a violent and tragic path. So I hope you will join us. I have some flyers on the table for anybody who needs more information, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes? Egypt is such a complicated matter right now. So the struggle, as you may know, so there was an Islamist, the Muslim Brotherhood government, that, depending on what position a Muslim leader or activist may have, they may answer this question differently. So bear in mind, this is my opinion, but the Muslim Brotherhood was in charge of Egypt. And the people, they said the general populace was really unhappy with the way they were running the country, the way they were treating religious freedom, the way they had drafted the Constitution, the way they had chosen members of parliament. And a lot of the people call it a populist revolt that was assisted by the military. The supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood and others say, no, it was a military coup. And then here you see this fight. So it was the pro-Morsi supporters saying that this was a military coup, we will not allow it to stand, and the populists saying that no, we threw him out and the military helped us. So I think what happened, how the Christians got stuck in the middle is, this is from the news reports that I read, and my friends say that it was the pro-Morsi supporters that said it was because of the Christians that they got this populist support and the military support, therefore let's punish the Christians for siding against us. So you will also hear that the mainstream Muslims formed a human shield around the remaining churches to try to protect them against the pro-Morsi supporters who destroyed those churches. So they're really stuck in a national sectarian conflict between these various factions. Does that make sense? So it's not because of Islam that they did it. These are the various Egyptian factions that are fighting. Yes, I would agree with that statement. A lot of churches and religious institutions are not allowed to form houses of worship in these Arab countries. And so what I often have to clarify for people is my presentation is on Islam, not on Muslims. So it's very hard to judge Islam by what Muslims do. And unfortunately, a lot of the countries and their governments or their populace are doing things that are not based on Islam. They're based on their local politics. And so there's no commandment in Islam that you can't build a religious house of worship. They cannot find such a doctrine in Islam. So it's that local country saying, we don't want any competition in Islam, so we're not going to allow them to build churches. And unfortunately, it requires the rest of Muslims to answer to such a requirement, but it's not part of the faith. So it's just like saying that something that England does to a particular community would indict all of Christianity or the Church of England. But people have disassociated secular countries from the religion, but we don't have that same separation in Islam, where people think what Muslim rulers do is reflective of Islam, when it really shouldn't be. Yes. Sure. So a martyr was supposed to be somebody who fought in battle in defense of the ummah. It is not a suicide bomber. So unfortunately, again, militants have abused that term and have taken it to mean a person who will kill themselves in battle. So historically, through centuries, Muslim scholars have said you cannot fight in certain death. Meaning, if you're doing something that will result in your certain death, that is suicide. That's not martyrdom. And suicide is strictly prohibited in mainstream Islam. So this, again, is the struggle between militants' interpretation and mainstream Muslims' interpretation of a term and a concept. Right. So Sharia encompasses everything. So it's the stoning, it's the Hudna laws, it's the stoning laws, and it's the prayer laws. So what I try to explain to people is I understand the will and the desire to limit laws that are in opposition to our way of life as Americans, but to call it all Sharia means that you're outlawing basic Muslim practices. So let's say 30 states ban Sharia. That means Muslims can't pray. You know what I mean? So the term embodies everything that's codified in Islamic law. The term is loaded. So for most of us, for mainstream Muslims, we can't abdicate possession of the word Sharia, because for centuries it's mean the entire corpus of law. So we want to get rid of certain laws. We want to prohibit the implementation of certain laws in the United States and respect our secular rule of law of this country. But we can't let go of that term because it's so much a part of mainstream Islam. Does that make sense?
How do we get to the extreme groups that do these things? There's a group, and I understand what you're saying, it's a universal term, but then how do we get to these extremists that do these horrible things?
So are we concerned about, you mean US laws?
I'm not talking about in your countries.
In those countries, well, I mean, I think we should talk about the specific practice. So banning stoning. I mean, Judaism and Christianity, I believe, had stoning laws back in, 8th century, right? So having people modernize and telling them they shouldn't be stoning their prisoners, I think is a very legitimate discussion for us to have. So I think we should just stick with the specific subjects. In other words, whether it's inheritance laws or divorce laws or crimes of punishment, that we deal with those laws specifically without throwing the word Sharia into the mix.
How about robbing? Let's discuss robbing. Robbing, you cut the hand off. They cut their hand off.
In historical, classical Islamic law, that was the punishment. But now modern scholars will tell you that that is not required. There's so many preconditions that exist and so many ways in which laws have been modernized and have evolved that that's not necessary. But it just depends on who you ask. So if you look at certain countries that have, whether it's Somalia or other countries that have imposed these very, very strict interpretations, they're deviant, militant interpretations of Sharia, and they start imposing these kind of laws, again, that's abhorrent to mainstream Muslims just as it is to you. It's just something that we're not in control of. Sure. So Shiaism, a lot of people will tell you it arose out of this disagreement about who was the successor of Prophet Muhammad. So Prophet Muhammad, the majority of the community accepted that Abu Bakr, his companion, would be his successor. And the Shia community follows Ali, which they believe was the rightful heir. So they believe his cousin and family member married to his daughter should have been the rightful successor of the empire. And so that's where the split began. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm an emergency nurse, and I encountered particularly Middle Eastern people who come in with abdominal pain, but they don't want to get undressed. It's something that we have a conflict with because our medicine, our Western medicine, requires that we inspect and so forth and so on. How can I best make them comfortable? Plus, many of our docs will go in and shake hands with the patient. And if it happens to be a female patient, and she's not supposed to shake the hand of the opposite sex, how can we make those folks more comfortable, but yet accomplish what we need to do in diagnosing what the problem is?
Difficult question. I think the handshaking is probably easy to forego. I think people would be okay with that. I think it's a cultural thing that we can get used to people not having different cultural habits. But the undressing is a very difficult issue. I know a lot of people that have gone through this issue, but most people should accept when they go to a facility that they're going to have to abide by the rules of that facility. So you do your best to accommodate what you can, but at the end of the day, people need to realize, and like I said, necessity waives sins. So if that woman is agreeing to be inspected by a male doctor, then she should agree to undress for the male doctor. But I understand that you may encounter this resistance, but you just politely say, I'm sorry, these are the rules of this facility, and this is what we're going to have to do. So I don't think there's anything else that you can do. Right. Exactly. Exactly. You're absolutely right. Great.
I hate to
Thank
step
you.
up here and stop this, but I have to also confess to all of you that the first thing I did this morning was stick out my hand to shake hands with,
I shake hands, so.
and you were so gracious. Now I know not to do that.
I give this presentation and then I go around shaking everybody's hand just to confuse them. So, and also, sorry, no, and those of us that do, we extend our hand so that it's obvious that we shake hands by extending it first.
Those sensitive in our culture understand also that between male and female, it's the woman who should extend her hand first.
Right.
But some of us are so blunt. Well, anyway.
Thank you so much,
Can
Pastor.
I have you thank?
Thank you.
What a wonderful thing you've done for us today.
Thank
What a
you.
wonderful thing. And now I'm really intimidated with following this act next week. But at any rate, thank you so much, both Shotzi and Hedieh, for being with us. You've honored us immensely. you could understand how little we understand and how grateful we are for your helping us. Thank you so much. May Allah bless you. It's the only Arabic I know. Thank you all so much. And we've come to that time when if Penny were here, she'd be now waving a calendar at me to point to the date. So thank you so much.